Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Sabrina Paganoni. I'm here from the HEALEY Center. Really excited to bring you our weekly updates. I'm here with Dr. Cudkowicz, the PI of the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial, and Dr. Eufrosina Young, one of our site PIs, and we'll hear from her very soon. And I'm also joined by Alison Bullitt, our patient navigator. So if we can go to the next slide. I'm really happy to introduce Dr. Young, who is the Platform Trial Site Investigator at SUNY Upstate. And so, Eufrosina, can you tell us more about your experience in the trial and your clinic?
Yes, thank you, Sabrina, and thank you for inviting me. So we are very fortunate to be part of the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial since December 2020. And we've been activated for Regimen E since March of 2022. SUNY Upstate in Syracuse serves central New York, and our patients come from a 100-mile radius. More recently, we have been seeing patients coming from a 250-mile radius through Binghamton and Pennsylvania. We average a total number of 120 patients a year, thereabouts, and with about a third of cases newly diagnosed ALS. The past 6 months, we have already reached that annual average number of new patients and follow-up patients. We are continually expanding our services from telehealth medicine to home respiratory monitoring and giving access to our patients to participate in drug trials in ALS. So before I show you the list of participants in our ALS clinic, our staff members, I was asked this question of how we go about introducing clinical drug trials to our patients. And I just wanted to mention 3 main highlights to that hour-long discussion or more. The first one is timing your participation, because early decisions matter. Disease duration, ability to swallow, and pulmonary function cutoff scores. These are common exclusionary factors to drug trials, and we always want to assure patients that they have that ability to make a decision to participate. And the second thing is choosing a drug trial. Is it consistent with your goals of care? If in the future, for example, feeding tube placement is not an alternative, then an intravenous infusion may make more sense. We come into an era of targeted therapies. Is one drug trial more promising than another? Very hard to tell. There is only one certainty, though, that participation will help future generations not walk in your shoes. So these are the talking points that we try to highlight. And the last thing is choosing your site, because there's the practical factor and the confidence factor. So the practical factor is considering proximity to research site. Transportation may be seasonal or weather dependent. Caregiver availability and access to site may be an issue, and COVID-19 related travel restrictions may need to be anticipated. The last thing is the confidence factor. Is you want to know that you're part of a team that is responsive to your needs. It's a multi-step process. There are important decisions made along the way. You have to meet in person, your principal investigator and research coordinator, in order to gain that confidence that this is your team. So for us, personalized care is critical, and it is in that context of anticipating needs that we hope to maximize patient adherence and prevent patients from dropping off from drug trials, and actually contribute to finding a cure for ALS. So if you're looking for an ALS team to partner with, this is our mantra. We are a team of people behind you that are invested in your care. And with that, I'd like to introduce our staff members. Jesse, if you can go on to the next slide. So we have Jeff Collins and Don Daly, our nurses, Stephanie Lesson, our clinic coordinator, and you have that email address that you can reach out to Stephanie. We have social work, spiritual care, Samantha and Father Eric, and we work closely with the ALS Association, and we have a fully staffed clinic with research coordinators. Next slide, please. Lena Deb is our primary research coordinator and research manager, and Marielle Demasi is our secondary research coordinator. and my sub-investigator is Dr. Jenny Meyer. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So if anyone is in the area or would like to partner with a great team, please reach out to the SUNY Upstate HEALEY team. So thank you for all you're doing for research. Now I just have a couple of slides to share our weekly updates. So if we can go to the next slide. Again, we are testing 5 drugs at this time. We're adding more. Next slide. Right now we are enrolling new participants for regimen E, and so those are the numbers. Every week we bring you the updates. So we're making progress in enrolling in regimen E. We have many more slots, so feel free to reach out to sites near you if you're interested in participating. Next slide. And right now we are enrolling for this regimen E at 39 sites. And since last week, we have one more site, Indiana University. We're actually very excited to start the trial in Indiana. At the beginning of the trial, actually, we didn't have a site in Indiana, but it was because of interest from patients from that area, as well as the investigator at the site, that we were able to then add them. And you can see here that we have some blue sites and some green sites. So the blue sites on the map are the ones that have been participating in the trial since the beginning, like Dr. Young's site. But then we have more sites that again have joined to allow us to enter new states, new geographies. So we're very excited to also work with the new sites that are labeled on the map and also underlined on the right. Next slide. And again, the new site is at Indiana University, and so that's kind of the new site that's now active for regimen E, and you can see the contact information on the slide. And then the other big news since we last spoke last week is that we announced the next new drug, really exciting drug from Calico AbbVie, and you can see the press release by clicking on the QR code or the link that's on the slide, and again, we're very excited to announce another drug that will enter the trial. Again, the goal here is to always have spots available for patients who want to enroll. And so the design phase is ongoing right now. And so we expect to be able to enroll over the next few months. Next slide. And this is always our slide for those of you who are new. Every week we have new people on the webinar. We have new listeners that watch also the recording. And so as a reminder, Alison and Catherine are always available to talk to you about trials or about contacting a site near you. And we are very excited that we continue to have a list of guest speakers. In addition to having site PIs like Dr. Young, who's with us tonight, we are going to have Dr. Chubnik back. She's one of our biostatisticians, and she's been with us already a couple of times. So we had a couple of great webinars where she took a number of questions about biostatistics. So she's going to come back because we continue to receive questions. And one hot topic that we also wanted to discuss is the use of placebos, because that's again one of the questions that we've been receiving on a regular basis. So she'll be back. I think it should be July 28th. We're still confirming that. Next slide. And I think that was the very last slide is a plug for our colleague, Dr. Harms, who's giving a trial on genetics in ALS. That's a Neil's webinar. So as always, we like to share information about webinars that we do, but also webinars our colleagues do in partnership with the Neil's Consortium. So the Neil's Consortium is the network of sites and clinics that work with us on the platform trial, and also have a number of other offerings in terms of webinars and other opportunities. So check out the website as well. And we have recordings that we also gave. Dr. Cudkowicz, myself, and others have done Neil's webinars as well about the platform trial, and they're available on the Neil's website in addition to our website. Great. And with that, I think we can stop sharing. And I don't know, Merit, if you want to.
Yeah. Thank you. We have some great questions already. I'll start with you, Dr. Young. There's a question about what are you excited today about ALS science? And you're on mute.
Yes, what am I most excited about in ALS science? I think it would have to do with home monitoring for respiratory and speech function. So I think this is opening, many doors, some of which we may not even be aware of, in terms of qualifying for drug trials and participation in drug trials. I think you have spearheaded this in the HEALEY platform trial, and we can see, increasing abilities to participate and remain in drug trials by allowing for this, very novel way to approach outcome measures.
Thank you. So Sabrina, there's a question about our recent press release, the one from yesterday about the AbbVie Calico drug. Will there be a webinar on the new regimen explaining the science in more detail?
Absolutely. It's actually a different mechanism. It's very exciting science. So we'll definitely plan a webinar. As you may remember from previous webinars, every time we open a new regimen, we have a webinar about the science. The slides need to be approved by our central IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board. So as always, there is a little bit of a lag time in terms of having those approved, but we will be working on them.
Yeah. I wanted to add that Calico, first of all, we're excited to partner with them. They are right now enrolling in their phase 1B. So that's an earlier phase trial where they're looking at dose and safety. And I think it's, Mass General Society, Hopkins, there's a few others. And I would recommend, if anyone's interested in that, also to consider that trial. That will be a very important trial to help us decide on the final dose for the HEALEY platform trial as well. There, and then just to look for sites, it's on www.clinicaltrials.gov, and we can put that in the chat as well. Again, related to the AbbVie, which will be regimen F, we believe. Sabrina, when will the new regimen begin enrolling? In particular, if someone's asking if let's say they're screening right now for regimen E, should they wait for that?
Well, I think that, I actually think that, I like the comments that Dr. Young made earlier about sort of the practical considerations as well, like kind of thinking, long term. Practically speaking, I think that right now regimen E is open. So I would encourage people who are interested in enrolling now in a regimen to enroll in that regimen or another trial. For example, the Calico trial, the 1B trial that you just mentioned. So I think that, that there's lots of great opportunities right now for trials in the platform or outside the platform. And then right now we're in design phase. So we expect that the new regimen will be available in a few months. But again, somebody may complete another trial in the meantime or be close to that. So personally, when I talk to my patients in the clinic, I also suggest, to look at the practicalities and see what's available right now. And then obviously, as new things open up, then people can complete one study and move on to another one.
There's a question for Dr. Young, which is how do you go about identifying like clinical trial options to provide for your patients, and then how would you advise your patients to go about identifying clinical trial options? And you're muted again. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for that question. When I think about the many patients that inquire about clinical trials, I mean, they could go about it by contacting our center and, outright telling us that they're interested in clinical trials. And other patients, or I think most patients, learn about participation in clinical trials while they're at clinic. And during that clinic visit, after the diagnosis is made and a discussion that focuses on FDA-approved drugs has completed, towards the end of that visit would be the question of, are you interested in participating in clinical drug trials in ALS? So I always like to put it, within that context and in that order, because the understanding of what the history has been like and what we're seeing on the examination and how we arrive at the diagnosis is so essential. And only at that point, after a discussion about FDA-approved drugs has been made, I think we segue into participation in drug trials so that patients are able to kind of think it through, in a fashion that is ordered, and explain it to caregivers and families what their decisions are based also on this ordered fashion. I think the harder question is which drug trial to choose, because we do see patients that tell us, I've been on clinicaltrials.gov, I've looked things up on Google, I've tried to figure out what would be most appropriate for me. And that in itself, is a very long, tedious process, which I think not just patients and families, but doctors and doctors that treat ALS go through. And I always go back to, what advice I can get from my colleagues, colleagues that have had years and years of experience in research. And, I think of the practicality, like I mentioned earlier, there's intravenous drugs and then there's oral drugs. When we think about targeted therapies, we hope we're in an era of targeted therapy soon. I think it's leading up to that, but we're not in a position to say, this drug trial will be of more benefit to you than the other. I think the last thing is, partnering with the site that is participating in that drug trial, because if anything, we always want to be able to merge clinical with research in a general sense, because that's for all practical purposes what patients need. If we have that sort of approach, then patients are in a far better position.
Thank you. Thank you. Sabrina, a question for you, which is, will for the new regimen with the AbbVie Calico drug, will the HEALEY platform trial offer an EAP or expanded access protocol for this regimen?
So we always ask all companies to donate at least a few spots for expanded access. So we don't have a specific start date or a specific plan yet, but again, that's been discussed. And so I would expect that we're going to be able to do that. That said, again, all the timelines, etc., for the EAP will depend. Again, I would like to emphasize that there is an ongoing trial right now already of the AbbVie Calico drug. So if people want to sort of enroll right now, that's already available.
Yeah, we wanted to announce as soon as we could that we were partnering with them, but it doesn't mean that the regimen is ready tomorrow or immediately to go in the platform trial. But we did want people to know, and we'll come in and share the science, but it's still a couple months away. So there's a question also related to Calico, maybe Sabrina, what phase will the Calico trial be when it's part of the platform?
Yeah, that's going to be a late phase. Basically, it's still going to be a trial that's fully powered and designed to provide definitive answers about the drug. The early stage trial is ongoing right now, as I said earlier, and you also mentioned. And so, when we open the regimen for the Calico trial, it's going to be again fully powered. Hopefully, if we see good results, it's going to be enough for registration or to be supportive of registration of a new drug.
Thank you. There's a question about whether we can share the CELOS, so Regimen E, the investigator brochure, and just to say that the investigator brochure is a document that companies write, that they submit to the FDA, that has all the information about the safety of the drug, all the preclinical studies, the animal safety testing, any data in people. I don't know, Sabrina, if you want to answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these investigational brochures are companies' property, and they generally include confidential, unpublished information. So I don't know, what could be again posted or shared.
I think one thing that can be shared is the consent form. So we have a consent form for the study that has all the information about the safety and the dosing of the study, and that people can get from their physicians or a trial site. Actually, I was wondering, Dr. Young, if you might share like how you go over maybe when you enroll, because you've enrolled some people in Regimen E, how you go over maybe the safety part of it, or the information that would in a way be in an investigator brochure.
Thank you for that question. So there is a cutoff for weight and glucose level. I recall from the master screen protocol, you can get that information that we share with our patients. And from the top of my head, I can't remember the numbers. I believe it's 140 for glucose and 144 for weight. So there is that in the contraindication of diabetes for regimen E. So I think these are exclusions that would benefit patients to know. Also use of oral trehalose would be a contraindication or an exclusion for participating in regimen E. But all in all, I think the exclusion list is fairly short, or a little shorter than most regimens that I've seen, and we've been able to qualify our patients.
Thank you. Sabrina, there's a question about someone who is trying to decide whether to go into regimen E, and thank you for that. But they're on TUDCA, and they would have to stop TUDCA for being the trial. And they're wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that's something that I would recommend discussing with the treating physician. I have that discussion all the time with my own patients in the clinic. And so the core of the question is that in this trial, and to be honest, in most trials, if people are on FDA-approved medications, they can continue them. But supplements or things that are still considered experimental or are being tried in other trials cannot be included, because otherwise they would confound the results. And so because the purpose of the trial is to tell, in this case, if trehalose is effective, if we sort of add investigational products or supplements or experimental agents, then we wouldn't be able to essentially answer the question of the trial. So I had that discussion with my patients all the time, and some people want to participate in trial for several reasons, because obviously these are all interesting drugs, and so they're happy to try to get access to them and participate in the research itself, and also contribute directly to the development of new drugs for people with ALS in general. If that's something that they want to do, then they'll have to come off some of the experimental drugs for the time being, for the time that they are in the trial. Other people prefer to use supplements or other medications sort of on the side, and that's kind of a personal decision. But I think it's something to discuss with the physician.
Thank you. There's a comment that trehalose makes biological sense to me. I wonder how many are reporting any positive changes. I don't know if Sabrina, you want to answer that first? And
yeah, I mean, we don't, we can only tell if a drug works or not, essentially when we look at the totality of the data. So when we look at the data from the trial database, because there's a lot of, for those of you who are in trials, you know that we take a lot of measurements. So it's not just sort of a one measure or one metrics, but it's really like a combination of measurements, whether they are questionnaires, muscle strength testing, respiratory function, etc. And so it's only the combination of all of these and very rigorous analysis that can tell us if a drug works or not. Again, people may report positive changes, but that's not what we base our, conclusions on. So I cannot, I don't know exactly. I actually don't see any of the patients in the trial myself. So I couldn't comment on that.
Okay, thank you. There's a question to me, I'll read it to me, which is about a book, Eyes to the Wind, and I'm quoted by the author as recommending B12 shots in a higher dose from the result, but the book was from 2016. And I have to say that I either forgot about this book, which is possible, or I never knew about it. So it's by Addie Barkin. I looked it up, and was a wonderful person. And I'm looking forward to reading the book now. I don't recommend higher doses of riluzole. In the initial study, they tested 3 different doses, including the one that's on the market, which was the middle dose, the 50 milligrams twice a day. And there wasn't a lot of clinical difference between that dose and the higher dose, but there were a lot more side effects in the higher dose. Now, the B12, which is a particular type of B12 called methylcobalamin, there have been 2 studies that are both published. The first one was actually negative it was a study in over 250 people followed for a long time. and the main analysis was negative, but there was a suggestion that maybe there was a subset of people that might have had some benefit. So they just published a recent study, a short study, 16 weeks, started in people within 12 months of the very first symptom, and they did see some positive results. And this is a drug by a Japanese company, Eisai. And I don't know, because I haven't been able to find anyone in the company. I don't know what their strategy is, whether they're going to try to go for approval or do another study, but that's still considered investigation. All right, so there's a question about the current drugs. If we could please give a date when the top line information will be made available for the first 3 drugs. I don't know, Sabrina, if you want to answer that.
Yeah, we don't have an exact date yet. I can tell you that it's going to be over the next few weeks. We are really looking at a massive amount of data that's coming in, because we're basically closing 3, the data for 3 drugs, not just for 1. I can tell you I spent the entire day looking at some of the kind of the blinded data. And so we are really finalizing everything to make sure that we can give you a date. And again, I want to assure you that everyone is working really around the clock to try to make this happen as soon as possible. It's going to be over the next few weeks for sure. I cannot tell you an exact day.
Yeah. And we're committed to letting the community know as soon as we know and the companies know and it's legally, can be shared. And we'll bring it to this group for sure. There's a question of whether the interim analyses for each regimen are released or only if they fail. I'm happy to answer that one. We do interim analyses, and I strongly believe, and I know Sabrina and Dr. Young also agree, that we don't want to continue treatment of a drug that might not be effective. I mean, that's just wastes everybody's time. So we built in these book called futility interim looks, meaning that if something is unlikely to work, we would stop it early. And so as you know, we announced last February that regimen A was stopped for futility. So we only announce it if we stop it for futility. But we don't share any details. We've actually not seen any of the details. The only person that sees the details is the unblinded statistician and the Data Safety Monitoring Board that is overseeing the safety of the study. So we're at the half hour. I'm just looking if we'll do 2 quick questions. One is for Sabrina and then one for Dr. Young. For Sabrina, is the top line data the same as the 12-week interim analysis?
No, it's actually more data. It's basically the top line data is the data telling us if the drug is safe and effective for ALS. The interim analyses are only looking at a subset of that to essentially screen out drugs that are unlikely to be effective. Yeah,
the top line results in an entire 160 people in the double blind period for 6 months. It's an entire data set. So Dr. Young, there's a question of, does the combination of Radicava and Riluzole work better than one or the other? Is there incremental benefit to taking both?
Thank you for that question. I think we have adapted that position wherein we start patients on Riluzole, and then once we know that patients are tolerating Riluzole, monitoring their liver function, we add on Radicava. So the combination of Riluzole and Radicava, we believe, is our best bet in slowing disease progression and as far as FDA-approved drugs are concerned. And I think there is data based on the literature and the trials that have been completed in the trials.
Thank you. I agree with you. I lied. There is one more question, and this will be our last one. Sabrina, can you comment on the press release from Clean about the survival data from the rescue trial, which is the small study in Australia?
Yeah, I think obviously we're very excited every time we have positive results in ALS, but again, the results from the Australian study are from a small study. But obviously we're very excited that we are about to know the results of the same drug in a much larger study, which is regimen C of the platform trial. So that's going to be one of the top line results that we're going to be releasing over the next few weeks. That's going to be essentially, sort of the next step in learning about this drug. So hopefully the results will be confirmed in this much larger trial.
Yeah. HEALEY platform trial is about 4 times larger, more people than the one in Australia, which is really a small early phase 2 study, 45 people for 9 months, compared to over 160. So I think our study will be robust to tell us whether the drug works or not. The other difference is that we're testing 2 doses and they were tested 1. So we're testing the one from Australia plus 1 higher. So it'll be additive information. Well, thank you again for joining us. We hope to see many of you next week. And thank you, Dr. Young, for joining us. It's really a pleasure to have you here and to work with you.
Thank you for featuring our center. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Sabrina.